This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. Baer, you're on The Speaking Show, buddy. Welcome.
I am on The Speaking Show, and we are speaking, which is why this show is so aptly named. It's great to see you, my friend.
Well, it's great to see you. And, we got so much to talk about, including talk triggers.
Yes.
Which is, of course, when you talk about talk triggers, does that set off that mirror effect where you see like 1,000 J Bears in the mirror?
I hope not. Each mirror is slightly more slimming, though, which is great news.
That is good news.
Yeah, at the end of the mirrors, I'm actually 145 pounds. That's extraordinary.
So quick sidebar speaking joke. When I sometimes go on stage and I'm not happy with the way I look, I will start out with a joke. I'll say, you know how when you're on TV, they say the camera adds 10 pounds. And then, the murmur of, yeah. And so, well, as you can see, I've been on TV 3 or 4 times.
That's a good line. I like that.
Feel free to borrow that. It's a public domain joke.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's good.
So I want to take us all the way back. And, this show is never about me. However, it's going to be a little bit about me only because of pages 95 through 97 of the Do It Marketing book. And so there's Talk Triggers 1.0. There it is.
When did we determine that I actually sent that to you?
You did.
Yeah, but when did we determine that? What was the actual...
It must have been 2012.
Yeah.
It was 2012 because that's when the manuscript was due, and then the book came out in June of 2013.
Yeah. And the first blog post I ever wrote about talk triggers on my site was 2011.
Yeah.
So, it was a long gestation, like an elephant-like gestation.
Well, this is what I was going to start out by asking you. Sometimes we as speakers, as experts, as consultants, we have a broad body of work. And then there's like a throwaway nugget or a little pet idea that's percolating on the back burner, side burner. What made you kind of come back to that? Because you did all kinds of other stuff before this. And the previous book, of course, was a huge hit. The book before that was a huge hit. This had like this 7-year, 8-year gestation period. How do we fish talk triggers out of the bin?
Yeah, you nailed it. It was something that I'd been occasionally writing about and occasionally talking about when I felt like it made sense in context, but I never thought it was, I just never thought it was a book. You know what I mean? Like I knew it was a thing, but I never really thought it was a book. And so Daniel Lemon and I, who co-wrote Talk Triggers with me, we had originally gotten approval from our publishers to write a different book called Retention Hackers, which is going to be about the world's greatest customer success people, right? The folks that, are the legendary people on the call center that will do whatever, however, to bend over backwards, because those stories never get told, right? They are truly unsung. And so we were going to write that book, and then we decided not to for a number of reasons that don't matter. And then we sort of set all books aside for a while, and literally, I was sort of just mulling, like, it's time to write a book. We got to come up with something. And I had a bunch of clients recently on the consulting side ask me like, well, we kind of understand now how to do social and how to do content, how to do digital, but we're having a hard time figuring out what the actual stories that we should be telling are. So I kind of had that in 1 year. And I was literally in the shower and I was like, what these guys need is a talk trigger. And I was like, oh, wait. I've already got a bunch of blog posts I've written about that, like boom, 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 boom. I'm like, maybe that could be a thing. So what I do, and I think you and I have talked about this at one point, is kind of different than a lot of other people. I start off with a keynote, and then if the keynote works, it becomes a book. So I don't write a book and then write a speech. I write a speech, make the speech good, and then if the audience really likes it, then it becomes a book. So what the first thing I did once I said, Talk Triggers could be the next platform, is the next time I had a potential speaking opportunity, I said, okay, I'm not going to talk about the things you want me to talk about. I'm going to talk about this new thing that you've never heard of, and sort of got enough of those sold to sort of build then the momentum for Talk Triggers and turn it into a book eventually.
Wow. So let's zoom in on that, because I would love to be a fly on the wall with that conversation where it's Jay Baer and the association meeting planner saying, oh, Jay, we love you. We love Convince and Convert. We love Hug Your Haters. Come and do a program. And then you go, no. We're not doing those programs. We're doing something new. And they're like, well, is there a book on that? You say no. And there's some blog posts and so forth. But how do you actually pivot that conversation to get to do that keynote that's the precursor to the book?
It's nice because one of my other programs, Hug Your Haters, which was the precursor to my previous book, Hug Your Haters, that talk is really about customer retention, right? It is a customer service, customer experience book. And so what I would say is when we had speaking opportunities, say, well, what's the most acute issue for your members or your attendees? Is it retaining the customers they already have or acquiring new customers? And if they said acquiring new customers, I would say, well, that's terrific because I've got a brand new talk that hardly anybody in the world has ever seen. In fact, it's not even a book yet. It's going to be really terrific. It's called Talk Triggers, turning your customers into volunteer marketers. Like, that sounds great. And then as soon as possible, like as soon as I started doing it, we got as much video as we could. So we could at least demonstrate that it wasn't a train wreck, right, for people. And it helps. I have a terrific agent as well who's very persuasive and sort of convinces people that it's going to be good in absence of any evidence that would prove that to be true.
So do you keep this under wraps? I mean, you said that you shoot a lot of video almost right away. Is this on the website? Is this one of like...
Yeah, I mean, Talk Triggers has been on the website for 15 months before the book came out.
As a keynote, as a speaking topic.
And I've done, before the book came out, I did that keynote 35 times.
Wow.
Now, my publisher is freaking out because their way of thinking.
They're seeing lost book sales.
Yeah, they're like, why would you ever do a talk of a book that isn't out yet? And I'm like, well, here's why. So every keynote I would do about Talk Triggers, before the book is out, I have a part in the program where I say, okay, I've told you this and I've told you that. We don't have time to tell you this, but if you text me right now, number on screen, I will instantaneously send you a PDF, which tells you the things I don't have time to tell you today. So before the book came out, I had gathered email addresses from 4,700 people who have been in the room while I gave the keynote and said, please tell me this thing that you haven't told me on stage. So that's a pretty good list to then email and say, you know, that book that I told you about as long as 15 months ago, it's here now.
Yeah.
So we sold a lot of books to those people this week.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really, really great. Well, I want to get into Talk Triggers. So the first question, if people have not yet read the book, I got to ask you, are you a Cheesecake Factory fan yourself?
So the Cheesecake Factory is one of the signature case studies in the book because they have a talk trigger. And I should define a talk trigger as a strategic operational differentiator that compels conversation. It's something that you choose to do differently in your business that customers notice and then tell one another about. And that story that your customers tell recruits new customers on your behalf. It becomes a word of mouth engine for the growth of your business. Cheesecake Factories actually is, and I have one right here, the Cheesecake Factory menu, which doesn't seem that large physically until I open this, David, and show everybody here. The size of this print is very, very small. So this menu, I had my intern borrow this one strategically, and I had her count these words, 5,940 words long on the menu, which is a lot. And it's so big. And imagine being a waiter there. Like, are you guys ready to order? Like, no, we're totally not ready to order yet. The menu is so big that people tell each other about that. Like, you couldn't believe how big the menu is. We actually did research on that for the book. We did 4 separate research projects in this book. And one of the research projects was we interviewed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Cheesecake Factory customers and found that 38% of them, David, have actually mentioned this menu and its size to somebody else in the prior 30 days. So almost 4 out of every 10 customers. So that really is the word of mouth strategy for this business. Now, am I a Cheesecake Factory fan myself? I absolutely am. I wouldn't say I seek it out in every city where I'm traveling, but I've never been treated wrong by the Cheesecake Factory, put it that way.
83 chicken dishes.
83 chicken dishes, which what I say on stage is everybody here has paper and a pen. And if I asked each of you to write down all the different ways that you can fathom making chicken, nobody here can do 20. And they have 83, which is pretty spectacular.
So I want to talk about this concept of word of mouth. And by the way, I have to give you a ton of credit. You must have spent so much money on the research for this book that you could not spend any more on artwork because all the artwork is like with pencils and Sharpies.
We wanted it to be a little more approachable, a little more visually interesting than your typical business book art.
But it's actually a lot of fun, right? Because it's little sketched bar charts and pie charts and then the 4 R's of the talk triggers that we'll get to in a minute. But I want to get back to this concept of word of mouth real quick because people like us, speakers, consultants, coaches, trainers, etc. When they say, in my experience, when they say, oh, I get all my business from word of mouth, that means it's marketing abandonment. That means that they're no longer in control of their marketing. They have abdicated and they're like, well, whatever business comes in the door comes in the door. So we're not talking about just abdicate your marketing or sales or business development responsibilities.
No. I'll say 2 things to that. One, you probably cannot live by word of mouth alone. And two, the big problem is that nobody does word of mouth on purpose. Like when somebody says they get all their clients through word of mouth, what that means is they get clients through word of mouth on accident.
Right.
See, word of mouth, according to the research, represents between 50 and 91% of all purchases. Okay, so it is extraordinarily important to everybody's business, certainly speaking, but really all businesses. I don't think anybody would debate that. No one's going to say, oh, word of mouth is unimportant. But it's the most important thing in business for which we have no strategy. Right? You've got a marketing plan, you get a digital plan, you have a content plan, a social media plan, PR plan, hiring plan, crisis plan. You got a whole desk full of strategies. But nobody has a distinct word of mouth strategy. It's just, well, if I do a good job, people will talk about me. But will they? And what are they saying? So the whole reason we wrote this book is not to remind people that word of mouth is important. There's a bunch of other books out there that already do that quite well. We wrote this book to give people a reliable system for having an actual proactive word of mouth strategy, for doing something different that people notice and talk about. And just being a good speaker ain't that.
Right. I love what you said in the book about how rarely we talk about a profoundly adequate experience.
Yeah,
Like,
nobody
man,
ever
that
says
was
that.
thoroughly adequate right there. That was really thoroughly adequate.
Yeah, let me tell you about this perfectly adequate experience I had tonight. It's just a bad story, right? Nobody tells that story because it's boring and lame.
Right.
So we discuss things that are different and we ignore things that are average.
Yeah.
And we are physiologically wired that way. So as a speaker, and I've done a few programs on talk triggers for speakers specifically, you have to do that one thing that people are like, oh, that's the thing she does. One of my favorite examples that I've talked about at NSA is our friend Jessica Pettit, terrific speaker on social change and difficult issues, things along those lines. When you fill out the Contact Us form on Jessica's website, I'd like to maybe talk to you about come and give us a speech. I'm laughing about it already before I even tell the story. She sends back an autoresponder email, and the autoresponder email is a 5-minute long video that shows with like close-ups and intricate detail her demonstrating how to fold a fitted bedsheet, which is amazing because usually people just ball them up and put them in the closet, right? Because it's got the weird like elastic on the corners and the whole thing's a mess. She's got this like crazy like origami system for folding sheets. And so she demonstrated, but the last line of the video is, you've just seen her fold a fitted sheet. Imagine what she can do at your next event. And I'm like, bing, bang, boom, talk trigger. Like if you see that, you will tell somebody, as I am now telling you and all of your viewers on the speaking show. Like the best talk triggers make word of mouth involuntary. You can't help yourself. You have to tell somebody about this thing that you encountered.
Yeah.
And being a good speaker or knowing a lot about sales or having a nice website isn't that. Nobody's compelled to tell that story because it's not novel in any way. Now, I'm not saying this is about stunts and being a clown, right? I mean, if you're going to be a speaker, you have to deliver the T's and C's, right? You have to have a terrific topic and you have to be able to create change. T's and C's. Like if you can't do that, don't worry about your talk trigger. Fix those things first. Yeah. But if you can bring, and if you've got the goods, then you owe it to your career and frankly your audiences to do at least one thing that people will know you for. That's your talk trigger.
Absolutely. Well, let's go into the 4 R's.
4 R's.
And let's talk about how we can maybe create some of these in our speaking business.
The reason we have the 4 R's is we don't want people to think that any random kind of fun idea they come up with is a talk trigger.
Like a hat. Jay, I wear crazy hats. That's my brand, right? Every speaker. Like, I wear a lot of green. It's like, oh, please, dude, seriously?
Yeah. I mean, now
that's what they think it is.
Yeah, I mean, that can work as a talk trigger. I would argue that the suit thing for me kind of is my talk trigger. So it can work. That sort of physical differentiator can be a talk trigger, but you've got to really commit to it, right? It can't be like, I usually wear green. Like it has to be your thing. Like you've got to own it. So that part can work, but it doesn't work for most people. 4 R's. First, talk trigger has to be remarkable, meaning it is worthy of remark. We've discussed that. If people have seen it before, it's not going to work. Second, it has to be reasonable. It doesn't need to be something vast and overwhelming and gigantic. In fact, usually if it is so gigantic, people distrust it, right? So it doesn't have to be big. It just has to be memorable. Third thing is it has to be relevant. So it has to make sense in the context of who you are and what you stand for. right? So Tony Newman, for example, has the red ladder. That's her talk trigger. Incredible program. She carries around a red ladder, and a full-size ladder, and uses it in every program, walks up and down the ladder in part of her keynote. Part of her premise is that at the top of the ladder, you can see your organization better and determine what makes them special. And then at the end of the program, she sends meeting planners little miniature ladders as a thank you gift. Like, it is interwoven into her content in a way that's really powerful and an extraordinarily good example. It's a relevant talk trigger. Like, so if you just want to have conversations, like, here's your thing. Okay, every keynote, I have a live raccoon on stage with me. Like, that's going to create conversation, but to what end though, right? I mean, that doesn't really help your business. So it's got to be relevant. And then it has to be repeatable. And that's what you were talking about. So I usually wear green. That's not a talk trigger. It has to be every event, every circumstance, every time, every situation. Scott McCain only wears black, right? Scott McCain only wears black to bed. Scott McCain only wears black brushing his teeth. Scott McCain owns no clothes that are not black. Like, it's not like, hey, when I'm on stage, I always wear a black sport coat like Steve Jobs. No, all the time, every time. Doesn't matter. Delivering Christmas presents, all black Santa suit. It is a commitment to the bit, right? And so your talk trigger has to be that. If it's going to be the thing that people know you for, it can't just be for big events or on Thursdays or when I'm out of the country. Like, you've got to own it every time.
Absolutely. Super quick commercial break. Isn't this interview amazing? If you'd like to get more ideas on how to start or grow your speaking business fast, pop over to our free training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Well, I think you also mention in the book about the bank with the funny name.
Umpqua Bank.
Umpqua Bank.
Umpqua Bank.
Right? Like, talk about an industry where you think, well, there's no differentiation. All banks look the same, act the same. You walk in, there's a branch, there's tellers, there's a guy behind the desk. How do you make like a really boring industry like banking? What are some talk triggers that if we think, oh, I'm an accountant or I speak on compliance, there's nothing exciting anywhere in my horizon. How did the bank approach it? And then what do you recommend for boring topic speakers?
So what Umpqua does is in every single branch, they have kind of an old-timey Victorian-looking silver phone on a stand. And above the stand or adjacent to the stand, they have a sign that says, let's talk, or what do you know? They changed the language a little bit, doesn't matter. But it's a list of phone numbers. And you can press one number, 6, I think, and you'll be connected directly to the bank president. Not the branch president, the president of the 400 branch Umpqua. And they get calls every week. Usually people are like, I just wanted to see if this actually worked. And then they're freaked out and they hang up, right? They're like, oh my God, it's actually the bank president. I mean, that speaks a lot to their commitment to responsiveness, to customer service, to values. And no other bank does that. So there's all kinds of people talking about it online all the time. It's pretty fantastic. It's a great talk trigger. Now, you talked about professional services and kind of boring speakers, and I would never characterize it like that, but you did. It's your show. The truth is, this kind of word of mouth strategy works even better because people definitely don't see it coming, right? Categorically, talk triggers have a greater impact on B2B than B2C because most B2B companies are intentionally boring. As we talk about in the book, we call it same as lame. You can do great things. I'll tell you my favorite professional services example in the book is my friend Glenn Gorab. Glenn's an oral surgeon in Clifton, New Jersey. He operates in the New Jersey, Connecticut, New York tri-state area, hundreds of oral surgeons in that area. He is the highest rated. He's also the only one who's never been sued, ever, despite the fact that he's not the best surgeon. By his own admission, he says, Jay, I'm a good surgeon, but I'm not the best. But I do have the best relationship with my patients. And here's why. Here's his talk trigger. Every Friday, his office gives him a list of names and phone numbers. Every Saturday, he calls those people. He says, hey, I'm Glenn. I'm your oral surgeon. I understand that you're coming into the office for the first time next week. Before you get here, do you have any questions? And people can't believe it because you probably have had an oral surgery because you maybe had your wisdom teeth out or whatever. And your doctor might call you the night after and be like, hey, are you bleeding to death? How are you doing? But nobody's ever called you before. And this not only works in medicine, you could do that as an accountant, you could do it as a lawyer, you could do it as any kind of professional service provider, but yet nobody does. And he says that every day, David, somebody calls and makes an appointment and they say, I have to drive 12 miles out of my way. I have to pass dozens of other oral surgeons, but I want to go to you because you're the guy who called my friend Shirley before she ever set foot in the office. It's so simple.
I love what you said about it's not about being a novelty act and being a clown. And it's also not some gigantic big deal, and it can be small if it's meaningful. And of course, if it meets the 4 R's.
Yes,
Do you
absolutely.
remember back when CD Baby was a thing and it was the famous email,
Yes,
right? The
absolutely.
CD Baby
That's
email.
very similar to Jess's, confirmation video. Absolutely. Yeah, the
Right.
CD email is exactly it. In a business like speaking, the way you figure out your talk trigger, and we have a whole bit about this in the book, of course, but the whole general idea is that you figure out all the touch points that you have with prospects, right? So meeting planner comes to your website, meeting planner fills out a form, you get back to them. At some point, there's a proposal, some point, there's an invoice, right? Blah, 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 blah. We have this system. What you want to do is figure out what people expect at every one of those steps. Because once you know what they expect, you then know what they don't expect. And the difference between what they expect and what they don't expect, that's where your talk trigger lies. So here's something that I don't do, but I think I might start because I just like the idea. And I bestow this upon the audience if they choose to do so. It's very common, of course, in the speaking business that at some point there is a proposal. There is a, here's what I will do, and here's the money that you will pay me in exchange. Well, if you asked meeting planners what they expect at that point, they would expect that you will email them a PDF attachment of the proposal. That's pretty perfunctory. That's how it's usually done. Well, what if, David, instead you sent that meeting planner a sheet cake, and the frosting of the sheet cake was made to look like the cover of your proposal? The proposal itself was printed and put into a laminated sleeve underneath the cake. So in order to get at your spectacular speaking proposal, the meeting planner had to eat an entire cake. Now, would that be a talk trigger? Would they tell their friends about that? Yes, they would.
The cake guy. I'm hiring the cake guy. That's it. The cake guy. Yeah, we're bringing him in. We're bringing him in.
I mean, that would work. I mean, I'm telling you, it would absolutely work because nobody does that and they don't
Yeah.
accept it.
Well, let's go behind the scenes here a little bit because we got stuffed llamas. The previous book had socks, and you're just a master of getting
a master of spending money on ridiculous stuff.
I know. So, what was the book launch? And then I also want to talk about some of the bonuses because you're doing some pretty cool things with your book bonuses too. So, little inside baseball with Jay Baer. What was the llama? What was give us the whole scoop there?
Well, I wish I could tell you that it was this masterstroke, but as so often is the case, is more of a happy accident. So the original cover for the book was bad. It was really not good. And so Daniel and I got together and we're like, look, man, this is a book about word of mouth. Like, we've got to do something other than a regular business book cover. Otherwise, we're just DOA on this thing, right? So we were inspired by Gene Bliss's book, Would You Do That to Your Mother, which is a fantastic book, by the way. I really recommend it. 2 great books this year on customer experience, hers and Joey Coleman's book, How to Never Lose a Customer, both awesome. So I was inspired by Gene's cover, which is like an old-timey 1950s sort of mom making like a surprise face on the cover. It's black and white. I'm like, that's a really interesting, pops off the shelf, but you don't see black and white covers. So I was just kind of messing around, and I'm no artist. And I sort of sent Daniel some, slapdash thing. And he's like, yeah, I know where you're coming from, but that's not it. So he went and just did some image searches and actually found this picture, this exact one of these is actually alpacas, David.
Sorry.
Of these alpacas. And he mocked up this cover in like 2 minutes and sent it to me. And I was like, yeah, I think it's great, but Penguin's not going to go for that. There's no way. And he's like, well, let's just find out. And I'm like, all right. So we send them the cover and they're like, great, let's do that. And I'm like, yeah. They're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah. They're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah. They're like, yeah. So boom, 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 new cover, whole thing. Like, that was it. So we only picked this image because it appears as though the alpaca is talking to the other alpaca. It is a word of mouth alpaca.
Yes.
But now it's like taken on a life of its own. I had my assistant, like, she gets a lot of weird jobs, like steal a menu and can we get, 500 stuffed alpacas, and so then we bought them and we handed them out to people who, pre-ordered the book and things like that. And now people keep sending me alpaca gifts as like the theme. So it's become like a talisman for the book, which again was not the plan. It just worked out that way.
So the book bonuses, when people go to talktriggers.com, we're going to link up all the goodies and the bonuses. You've done some crazy stuff here, dude. You're like giving away your presentation saying, hey, here's a presentation. Why don't you go tell your friends how awesome this is? So did that cause some alarm bells to go off, or talk about all the juicy book bonuses that are at talktriggers.com and what's kind of scary about that, about giving away your presentation?
There's a lot of, here's the truth. Like, you could go to talktriggers.com, download the stuff, and you wouldn't have to read the book. Now, would you be better off reading the book? Yes, because of a listed ingredients doesn't make you a chef. But we have a lot of stuff there, right? We've got the 6-step process graph. We have an infographic. We have videos. We have the PowerPoint presentation. We have a group book club discussion guide, a whole research report that we did, a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, it's a lot. Here's the way we look at it. It's a book about word of mouth. And if you're going to go down that road, you have to, as Chris Brogan once said, give your ideas handles. So it's more important for us. Now, I hope Penguin isn't watching this. I would never say this to them. To me, it is more important that people know and adopt the principle of talk triggers than it is to sell a book. Because long term, that benefits me more than the royalty I get on that book sale. So yes, I desperately hope people will buy the book. And we've sold a lot of books, and thank you to you all. And I feel confident that you will like the book. But this is not a pay me to know what we know. It's here's what we know. And if you'd like to read the book, we hope you will, because it's a riot and all that. I will also tell you that we have a talk trigger for the book itself that you may know.
Is that about the guarantee?
The guarantee.
I was going to ask you about that next.
Perfect. This is another one that's a little crazy. Like, yes, is it crazy to have that much free stuff at talktriggers.com? Probably. This is the most crazy. And this is one that I even had to convince Daniel to do, because he was like, you're insane. David, this may be the worst decision I have ever made in business. Time will tell. So far, book's only been out 3 days. So far it hasn't bit me in the ass yet. But again, it's only been 3 days. This could truly be a bad idea.
This is like shorting a stock. Like there is no limit to how much you can lose.
This could be really bad. I am hopeful, but there is a chance that this could be my Waterloo. It says on the back of this book, these are the words: satisfaction guaranteed. If you bought this book and didn't like it, go to talktriggers.com and send the authors a note. They will buy you any other book of your liking. And that is our promise to readers. If you don't like it, if you want a first edition Bible or whatever, we'll track one down. We'll figure it out. So could somebody say, that's what Daniel said. Well, what if somebody wants this and he found some $10,000 cookbook on Amazon? He's like, what if somebody says they want this $10,000 cookbook? I'm like, well, that would suck financially, but I would have a press release written about that in 30 seconds. So I feel like ultimately we would win, but I don't know.
That is totally fantastic.
So, we'll see what happens. Look, we believe in the book. We know it's good. Other people have said it's good. So it's not just me or my mom. And look, if you can't stand behind it, well, then why would you write it in the first place?
Absolutely right. Well, Jay, people know and love you from our previous podcast episode. They obviously know and love you even more now with Talk Triggers. Talk just a little bit for 30 seconds about your real job over at Convince and Convert, and all of the podcasts and all the sponsorships and all the other great stuff that's cooking, maybe even as a result of this new book.
Sure. So Convince and Convert has 3 divisions. There's about 15 of us. We're virtual across the US. We have the live division, which is speaking. So that's in workshops, mostly me, but there's 7 other people on our team who speak, do keynotes and workshops. So there's a number of speakers on the team. So there's that whole piece. We have the media division, which is our website, our blogs, our webinar series, our video series. We work with a lot of corporate sponsors to create content and generate leads on their behalf. So we're always doing projects, research reports, webinars, all that. And then we have the consulting division, which we're perhaps best known for. And our team works with lots and lots of big brands on word of mouth strategy, how to build talk triggers for big companies. We do content marketing strategy, social media strategy, etc. It's a lot of fun, never a dull moment.
Totally fantastic. And like I said, we're going to link up all of the show notes, all of the good stuff down there. So I'm going to ask just one final question, which is, if people were to take one key concept from our Talk Triggers conversation today, what would you hope that would be?
People will not talk about you unless you give them a story to tell. That's it. That's what the whole book is about. This assumption that just being good will create conversation is not true. Because guess what? All your competitors also good. So that's not talkable, right?
Not talkable. You want to be remarkable. You want to be talkable, bookable, buyable, visible, credible.
The best way to grow any business is for your customers to do the growing for you. You've heard this phrase, David. It's not entirely true, but it is true in the context of this conversation. Advertising is a tax on the unremarkable. There's some truth to that.
For sure.
The speakers who are really busy aren't out there beating the bushes because they do a thing that's different enough that everybody talks about them.
Right.
That's why I'm going to learn to juggle.
Yes.
Look out, Dan Thurman.
I am getting a long blonde wig because now it'll be the hair guy. Get me the hair guy.
Samson. David Newman as Samson. I like that. That's a good angle.
Yeah, Samson, Fabio, we're going to do it all.
It doesn't matter. You just got to have a thing and have the courage to do it. I mean, we, especially in speaking, tend to follow the leader. We say, well, this person kind of speaks about what I speak about. What are they doing? And how can I sort of gravy train off their deal and sort of be more similar to them so that it's perceived lower risk for meeting planners, et cetera, et cetera. And I totally understand the intellectual appeal of that avenue. But if you're going to follow the leader, you will never, ever, ever, ever be anything other than second best. It's not mathematically possible. And if all you care about is averages, you'll never be anything other than an average business person. You've got to have the courage to say, I don't care what everybody else does. I am going to play my own game, and I'm going to do one thing that nobody else does. And that's going to be my talk trigger. And I'm going to own it, and I'm going to stick with it.
Totally fantastic. But Jay Baer, tell us how we can get connected and stay connected to you for all of this goodness and everything that we need to know to be successful online, social, talk triggers, everything.
Just come over to the house. Just show up over here. We'll do it face-to-face. Everybody's welcome. Everybody's welcome. Here's my mailing address. Go to talktriggers.com, as mentioned. Got all the stuff there, all kinds of free stuff. Convinceandconvert.com is our main site, which has all of our blogs, podcasts, like thousands and thousands and thousands of pages to make you
too much, really. I mean, too much if you ask me.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And then jbaer.com is my site for speaking and things along those lines. You can find me all over LinkedIn and Twitter, of course, and Facebook and all the places you can find people. Books available, all the places you can get books, in all the ways that books are currently offered. There's an audiobook read by Daniel and myself. Kindle is in all the airports now. You can't miss it. Just look for alpacas.
Look for alpacas. All right, my friend. Awesome to talk to you. Thanks for being on.
Oh, so good to see you again. Thank you for the time.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.